Test, 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 test.
front should be immediate family, so children. Can you sit over there? Thanks. Sorry, I didn't know who was doing this. You may be seated. The psalmist wrote, I lift my eyes up to the mountains. From where does my help come? It comes from Adonai, maker of the heavens and the earth. Esa enai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Esa enai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai ose shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai ose shamayim va'aretz. Good morning, friends. My name is Rabbi Jeff Brown from Scarsdale Synagogue, and we are, of course, gathered here today to mark the passing of Judith Elkins. I bring prayers of strength and condolences from our entire congregation to Lisanne and Mark, to David and Alicia, and of course to Judy's beloved Emily, Olivia, Riley, and Margot. Jewish communities all around the world are reading from the book of Numbers, the fourth book of Torah, during this season. And the author of the book of Numbers seems to have been particularly focused on the question of counting. Repeatedly throughout the text, separate censuses, counts of the Israelites are undertaken. Our ancestors wanted to quantitatively capture and record the vitality of the community, not only by lifting up the values and commitments that defined our ancestors' way of life, but also by noting how many lives were part of that community, and even recording how long our ancestors lived, all for the purpose of taking a sacred measure of who they were and what they contributed to the world. The psalmist was also intensely interested in this question of counting as it pertains to how we ought to meaningfully mark the passage of time. Thus, the biblical author wrote, Limnot yameinu kein hoda v'navi levav chokhmah. Teach us to count our days rightly, that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. As we reflect on Judy and the life that she lived, we join in counting the number of her days, and we take stock of the family that she and Paul, of blessed memory, helped to create and the legacy that she leaves behind. I had the honor of getting to know Judy over the years as a longtime member of our congregation when I first arrived here in 2012. In the context of mourning Paul's loss with her in 2015, and most joyfully, getting to celebrate Riley's bat mitzvah with her in 2021. I was struck then, in the midst of the heart of the pandemic, by the sense of love and devotion that she had for her grandchildren and the meaningfulness that the role of grandmother held for her. May Judy's memory inspire us not just to count our own days, but to make each and every one of our days count by living fully, sharing what we have with others. In doing so, may we all merit to acquire loving hearts of wisdom. May Judy's memory, the memories of all of our loved ones, live on to be for a blessing, and let us say together, Amen. Our angels, they spend much of their time sleeping. In their dreams, they tear down the new houses by the sea and they build old ones in their place. No matter how long they may sleep, 100, 200 years, 10 centuries is not too much. The first to wake up takes the torch that has been handed down, adds a drop of oil to the lamp, blesses the eternal light, and then recalls the name of every other angel. And one by one, as they're remembered, they wake up. For them, as for us, there is nothing more beautiful than memory. Rabbi Alvin Fine offers the following words. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death is a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. We have the opportunity now to hear from some of those who knew Judy best. We'll be hearing first from her sister Nina, then from her children, Lisanne and David, then from her grandchildren, first Margot and Riley, and then Olivia and Emily.
From a very young age, I learned that my sister delighted in and had mastered the art of pushing boundaries, being naughty, being adventurous, and delighting in magical fantasies. She had the power, and she used it well. I was the anxious 4-year-old who was agog when she cleverly gouged out a hole in our rose-covered wallpaper in the center of a white rose near her headboard so she could pass notes to her best friend Roberta, our next-door neighbor. It was years before our mother found out. When I was 6 and lost my first tooth, she woke me up at 6 o'clock the next morning to check that the tooth fairy had taken my tooth and delivered according to plan. When I saw a shiny quarter, that was a signal that the beginning of our fantasy. My sister carefully steered me down the stairs to see the slight opening at the bottom of the dining room window. where the fairy had entered and gone, leaving some sparkly fairy dust, some smudges, and a butter and eggs flower fairy slipper. We put the dust, sparkles, and flower slipper in a small cardboard box. I was a believer. But Judy was just getting started. Pushing boundaries is, of course, what really smart, innovative people do. Her indomitable spirit was just gearing up. When her flat feet and scoliosis brought panicked parents attention and uncomfortable choices, like having back surgery and lying in a back brace for 6 months, she would have none of it. So at the age of 15, she decided that beautiful clothes and a sexy walk were the absolute best solution, and did she flaunt it. She was gorgeous. She was a fabulous dancer. She had beautiful clothes and was a stunner. She was social, gregarious, a young teen with such grace and beauty. She used her talents throughout her life. She turned all her deficits into positives. She loved people, parties, and had mastered many detail-rich skills, creating a beautiful segue into her work for pediatric cancer. In the last few years, she spent a lot of time engaging artfully with things. She had an incredible ability to create beauty in everyday objects, plants, photos. Her sense of humor and whimsy and freedom allowed her to create beautiful arrangements of objects, photographs, her plant rainforest in her bathroom, and even hanging our mother's abstract paintings upside down or sideways because they connected to her better. And after all, the power of art is to create a connection between the artist and the viewers. And my sister did just that. My sweet Judy's original creative spark brought so much vitality to all of us who knew and loved her. May her memory be for a blessing.
I have found it particularly challenging to write this eulogy due to the complex relationship that I had with my mother. After writing several drafts, I see that this is not about me, that this should be a tribute to Judith. But I think it has been difficult in my life with her to discern what was her and what was me. And it has taken many years and a lot of support to unknot the interwoven aspects of my relationship with her. Judith had both an external persona and an internal one. She was fiercely social, creative, and extravagant, and she reveled in the idea of seeing the world as she wanted to see it. Living a rather charmed life, she was able to promote this image almost to the end of her life. Those who have contacted me to offer their condolences use similar adjectives to describe her: magical, wonderful, outrageously generous, another mom to me, fun-loving, stylish, always supportive of me. These perceptions are valid. Her internal, more private persona at times manifested anxiety and fear, undoubtedly a product of much intergenerational trauma. There was sometimes shame, anger, and volatility. I think this was an inevitable consequence of her relentless idealism. At times, this was difficult for her children to accept, but in her life, as in her death, she did it her own way. I often felt like an actor in a play that she directed. Sometimes I played many roles, and I was the main character or the villain. Often, I forgot my lines. So, who was her audience? It was all of us. Yes, she was beautiful, charismatic, helpful, kind, flirtatious, witty, exciting, popular, fashionable, excessive, and highly skilled at being a queen. Generosity, creativity, and social skills compelled Mom on a path toward philanthropic work. She was president and then medical liaison for Pediatric Cancer Foundation for many years. She worked tirelessly with the foundation and various doctors and hospitals to raise money for children with cancer. She was an amazing host who conjured imaginative parties and gatherings over years of celebrations and milestones. She traveled to St. Martin, Europe, Canada, Costa Rica, and Montauk with her best friends and husband. In her prime, she was a culinary master, and she took a special interest in teaching cooking and nutrition to school children. I remember her coming to my third grade class to make Raggedy Ann salads. A scoop of tuna salad for the body, a lettuce dress, carrot hair, an egg for a face, raisin eyes, and farmer cheese bloomers. I recall the 80th birthday party she threw for her mother, my Grandma Eve. Every detail was attended to, and every dish was inspired by a famous work of art. Her Judy's Justa motto took form in brownie recipes, exotic Asian cooking, fondue, and fondant. But she also honored her Grandma Tilly with family recipes of spice cookies, Hamantaschen, gefilte fish, and Jewish chicken soup. She had a deep connection to her Jewish roots and an idealized definition of family. She was committed to preserving the mythical image of her parents and her little sister Nina. Growing up in Sunnyside, Queens, she lived close to her grandma, various aunts, uncles, and cousins. She sought to maintain those family connections for the rest of her life, and a desire to learn more about her roots brought her to visit Poland with her Uncle Jack, where she saw the sites of our family's origin. Museum-like exhibits of her predecessors and descendants were intermingled with elaborate decorations in her home. Photos of her beloved granddaughters adorned the walls. She was an adoring and loving grandma to Emily, Olivia, Riley, and Margot, as well to Sarah and Alicia, even as her illness began to steal her memory and weaken her. The last 6 months of Judy's life were very difficult for all of us. I'm grateful for all the support I received from my daughters, friends, my brother, cousins, and especially my partner, Mark. He remains an anchor for me when I'm feeling most unmoored. I also have profound gratitude for Mario and especially Milena, who was kind and patient and consistently present for my mother through the very end. Judith was a complicated, multifaceted human being with flaws and strengths. I will miss her terribly, and I don't yet know how my life going forward will look without her constant presence.
My mom spelled her name Judi, Judith shortened to Judy. One of the things Liz mentioned just now in her eulogy was the Judy's Justa trademark. Judy with a Y and not with an I, just the Judy. This was a real thing with my mom. And I remember the first time I had heard it, thought she was nuts. She was making homemade strawberry jam, and after she jarred it up, it apparently needed a name. Judy's just a jelly, she said proudly. But Ma, it's not jelly, it's jam. But that's what keeps it interesting and different, she declared. She made a label in gold fancy lettering, stuck it on the jar. Judy's just a jelly. Done and dusted. Everything after that was Judy's just a something. It wasn't always an alliteration, but it had to be cute or clever, very punny perhaps. She loved the puns. My dad made up one tidy little word for this, and I'm sure many of you here might have heard it. Gleepy. He said she was such a gleep. A booty ting, but on top of that, she was a gleep. Gleepy meant goofy, goofily, punny, kinda clever, so unfunny it was funny. Nowadays, we might say that's a dad joke. My mom really loved puns. She found them very clever. She felt a certain proud victory when she made one up. She loved the play on words. She loved rhyming. What it really was is that she loved to make things special and different and unique and not just ordinary. Like, say, swapping a Y for an I in the ordinary name Judy. And why, do you ask, did she do that? Well, why not? Gleepy, gleepy. This whole gleepily unique and let's not be ordinary concept kind of fueled who she was. It kind of empowered her creatively to change the rules, including birthdays, among other things. If anyone knows one thing about my mom, you know that she really loved the birthdays. So much so that having one birthday wasn't enough. She decided, and she made it so, that we were going to have 2 birthdays, celebrating a half birthday, complete with a half birthday cake and candles, literally half a cake. The sky's the limit when she puts her imagination to task, seeking something new and different and out of the ordinary. For my dad's 50th birthday, the epically gleepy party, for the invitation, she sent each and every invitee a package which contained a yard of pinstripe material, my dad's favorite pattern, and asked everyone to make an article of clothing out of it so they could wear it to the party. Sounds nuts, but we all did it. People really loved being a part of Judy's just a gleepy shenanigans. Anyway, when I was going through some of her stuff, I recently found something that she saved. A letter or a proclamation of sorts that I wrote to her in 1980. May 19th, 1980, a day after my definitely celebrated half birthday. And probably was also Mother's Day, since it was in May, another JAE fave, by the way. I was 12, Margot's age. And I guess I got in trouble for something. I probably did something really bad, like draw on the furniture or something. And I was trying to make it up to her by writing something that I thought was clever. Kind of rhymed. Not exactly sure what this is, to be honest, but here it is. I Love My Mother by David Elkins. I love my mother. She tries her hardest to do the best. She couldn't get away once for a rest. And it's not hard to say why I'm a pest. The first thing is why I always write on the furniture. Then she always says, I'm angrier. I always do things so stupid that I can't believe. Then she would give me that look that I would always receive. My sister Lissy, she's a bigger pest than me. Even though I always say she was so pretty. I wrote it. And it is true, you know, that I love her so. I love my mother no matter what she does to me. She's the best I'll ever see. It's my mommy. I think Margot's going to come up now.
Over 12 years of knowing my grandma, I realized that we're actually a lot alike, in positive and maybe negative ways too. I mean, I don't really know. I'm only 12. I wrote a letter. Dear Grandma, I miss you so much. I'm so sad you're gone, and I love you. Dear Grandma, I miss you so much. I'm so sad you're gone, and I love you with my heart. Now you can see the purple moon for real because you're up in the stars. Thank you for being such a loving grandma. I'm forever grateful you were there when I was born. You were probably the only grandma to be in my life for 12 years. I might be smiling right now, but it's not because I'm happy that you are gone. It's because that I'm so relieved that you are not suffering anymore and you are finally at peace. You loved it when I told you stories about stuff from my life and told you all of my favorite things. A part in Demon Slayer, my favorite show, explains my feelings about this perfectly. It's when Tanjiro, the main character, sliced the boulder in his training. After he ended the fight with the boy who trained him, he smiled. He looked happy but also sad. He was relieved that he cut the boulder. That's how I feel about this entire thing. I'm not happy, but I'm relieved. You were such a thoughtful person to me, and I always smiled around you. I will never forget the time where I was on the toilet and you turned around, pulled your towel off, and flashed me. I was 5 or 6. I'll also never forget the time when we were in the car. She was driving, Dada was in the front of the car, and I was in the back seat. And then I asked her a question. I said, Grandma, did you ever have kids? I promise I will never forget you and all the times that I had with you. I remember the last time I saw you, you told me not to cry. Sorry for crying anyway. My mascara is probably running right now. I will miss you forever. I hope you and Poppy see each other again. I appreciate you with everything I have, and I love you. Rest in peace. Love, your favorite and youngest granddaughter, Margot Eve.
Probably should have listened to my dad and printed this out, but you know. On Friday, June 7th, I woke up to the delightful sound of my phone ringing. It was my father. As soon as I saw his name pop up on my screen, I knew what had happened. We said few words to each other before I got dressed and told my teen tour group leader, Sarah, the news. After a flight had been arranged, 2 days later, on Sunday, I was on a plane from Los Angeles to New York. On that flight, I thought of only 2 things, probably. The first, how badly I had to pee, but how the woman next to me was too drunk to get up. And second, how many things my grandmother did that I didn't ever appreciate. It's always said that you don't truly know how good something is until you lose it, and I never before had a moment quite as accurate. My grandma was a lover of nature. So much so that she would quite literally stop in the middle of the road to tell me the specific scientific name of a plant. At the time, I couldn't find it any more annoying. Even sometimes, well, usually, yelling at her to keep driving and then pretending to listen while she rambled on about how a Japanese maple tree is actually called an Acer palmatum. Acer because it's a type of maple, and palmatum because the leaves look like hands, complete with 5 fingers. And no, I didn't look that up. I simply remember the fact as she repeated it maybe 40 times. Another thing that I never appreciated about Grandma until now is her love for storytelling. Something I never quite understood, and still don't, is how she could remember almost any story from her childhood, but not how she told me the same story 5 minutes ago. However, at the time, her incessant storytelling was less than pleasurable. Now, at least some of her stories are ingrained in my memory forever. While I remember bits and pieces for most of them, there is one story that I remember clear as day, which I would like to share with you all. Early last year, Grandma would drive me places after school, including horseback riding. Whenever we went through this one specific intersection, which sadly I'm forgetting the name of, she would describe to me how when she was 15 years old, before she was allowed to get her driver's license, her father took her driving. He brought her on this intersection, and Grandma is speeding like hell through a traffic light down this massive hill. "Slow down, baby," her father said. After that, whenever we went through that intersection, even if we were mid-conversation, she would simply say, "Slow down, baby," and then tell the story again. I'm actually kind of grateful that she told me that story. Now that I have my permit and hopefully my driver's license come October, I will constantly be driving on that road to go to horseback riding. And just as she always thought of her father's words, she has granted me the passage to now always think of hers. By the time I had gotten my permit, Grandma was no longer allowed to drive, which is extra sad as she taught everyone else in my family. According to my dad, she was even telling him that she was going to take me driving, even though her driving privileges were taken away and she could barely walk. At least to me, this short story was her driving lesson for me. I'm confident that I will never speed through that intersection, not because it's obviously illegal, but because I will always hear her voice telling me to slow down, baby.
My grandma Judy was an integral part of my life. There was never a moment between us where I didn't feel loved, supported, and special. Grandma was one of my biggest fans in life. But besides giving me and helping me fulfill every opportunity, my grandma represented comfort. She was a known energy in the room. She was my Virgo match, and she was a stand-up comedian. She taught me Yiddish words and how to crack gum, and relentlessly demanded a kiss and a hug during all hellos and goodbyes. She taught me how not to drive on the Bronx River Parkway, as a double yellow line never seemed to matter much to Judy, especially when you're already running an hour late to some event. She taught me that Toblerone chocolates are delicious and that Bloomingdale's has some of the best frozen yogurt in Westchester. She taught me that family is unconditional. She showed me that the matriarch is strong and that generosity can be a karmic value. I am so grateful to say that I feel as though I was also able to teach her things. She recognized the differences between the world she grew up in and the one I have come into. She wanted to learn what I knew, and regardless of how little she may have actually understood, my Grandma Judy chose to connect both with me and with others that have come into my life, no matter the fear she carried about the unknown. I find comfort in knowing we shared a patient, transparent, and loving relationship, especially because this was a side that felt specifically reserved for her grandchildren. My grandma is comfort in the way she will forever remind me of a nurturing childhood and a generational independence. She is comfort because of the closeness she brought my family and the way in which I see her values in myself. I would not be where I am without my incredibly loving and strong mother, but I would also not be where I am today without my Grandma Judy. I will miss you so much, and the grief I feel from your death has been and will continue to be extremely painful, but I will never forget you, and I will love you forever.
Judy was much more than my grandmother. She was more like a third parent to me and a very close friend. We had an extremely close relationship, and she enabled me to have many incredible experiences in my life, like sleepaway camp and summer trips. She taught me about Jewish culture and the history of New York City. She passed down stories about her parents and grandparents. Throughout college, when I lived farther away, we FaceTimed and called each other consistently. All of my friends knew how special our relationship was and how close we were. Judy was my loyal advocate, and she was always there to help me make important decisions in my life. In her last remaining days, I was there by her side through the entire process. It was very difficult and painful, but I'll never regret being there during that time. I was able to be present during her last week, and that is something I will remember forever. I'm heartbroken that she is gone. This is a huge loss for myself and my family. It doesn't feel fair, but I remind myself she lived a long, beautiful life and was a friend to so many. Judy was an amazing grandmother and person. She wasn't perfect, but nobody is. One of my favorite memories of her was the time I asked if she could keep her eye out for a vintage-looking mirror. I really wanted a gold ornate mirror that I could put on my dresser and thought maybe she would have one or could find a cool one for me. Instead, she found a vintage-looking picture frame, put a piece of mirror inside of it, and spray painted it gold for me. A simple act, but a true example of her ability to reinvent things and of her endless generosity. I was always in awe of her creativity. If you have been to her home in the Berkshires, you will know that she decorated each and every room with a specific nature-related theme. I don't think life will ever be the same without her, but that is something I will need to eventually accept and be okay with. It's going to be difficult not being able to call her every day. I will love her forever. I could not have asked for a better grandmother.